So
I
I'm
was so
debating
busy
whether I
trying
do
to
an
get
internship
them.
or just take.
And then I had the memos
So it depends on if one of those courses are offered.
other people
During the spring, you know, kind of like that.
and other
I
things
know.
of importance that I want to talk about. But I
It's
made
exciting.
myself a lot of notes. But I wanted to do a markup.
I don't know about y'all, but I keep like 1,000 screens open. So I try to minimize them. Then I'm like paranoid about what I'm going to close accidentally.
There he is. There's our fearless attorney.
So far, how many you got? There's no vending machines in the whole building?
There he is.
Okay, well, water it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was keeping it in the road. Where's Mr. Hurst?
There's no curve, right?
Oh, there is no curve. There's a little bit of a curve, but there is.
Out and down.
Yes, we are ready. Thank you. We're going to get started. Oh, wait. I got to...
You got a straggler.
Been ready for 3 minutes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the July 10th meeting of the 2020 Orange County Charter Review Commission. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. For those, we have an agenda for today, and we're going to get in one quick moment to our invited guests. But I'd like to remind those of you who wish to speak via public comment that we will be taking comments for the entirety of the agenda at the beginning of this meeting. If you would like to speak, you need to provide a written pink slip to our CRC staffer here to my left. And we will, like I said, take comments for the entirety of the agenda at the beginning of the meeting for those people who have provided a slip. So please avail yourself of that process if that is your desire. Moving on to our agenda, our first item on the agenda is to welcome our invited guest, Commissioner Victoria Siplin for District 6.
It's an honor because I wanted to first say thank you to each of the members here because I understand you're volunteering, and this is one of those thankless jobs that you don't get paid for, and so I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I did want to also recognize my members of the board, Nikki Mims, and of course Russell Drake. Hopefully he'll show up, but I really appreciate you guys agreeing because like many commissioners, we often try to find people to serve on boards, and it is very difficult to find people to volunteer, so my hat goes off to each and every one of you. In addition to that, I just wanted to, again, welcome you to one of our newest facilities in District 6, the Holden Heights Community Center. This facility is it's used by many in the community. We stay busy here at the Holden Heights community, so hopefully this will not be your last visit, and I welcome you, and I also welcome all of the residents throughout Orange County that are here to make your voices heard and your concerns known to the members, and hopefully they will take those concerns into consideration as they go ahead and make their decisions, and hopefully it'll all work out for 2020 when we all go to the ballot, to the booths, and cast our votes. So we really appreciate you, and I do appreciate all of the residents coming out and spending time here to voice your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Siplin, and thank you for your service as well. We will now move into the public comment portion of the meeting. As I mentioned, if you want to speak and it's for the entirety of the agenda, please provide us a filled out notice of intent to speak. I will start with the forms that I have here. Our first person that I have a name for is Marjorie Holt. Will you please approach the podium? Each person gets 3 minutes to speak. That is the entirety of the time that you get to speak. Ms. Holt, when you begin, will you please correct your name in case I said it wrong? Give us your address, and as a reminder to everyone here, including my members, we will not be responding to your comments in the course of this program. We'll just receive your comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, good evening. I am Marge Holt. I reside at 8502 Elveron Avenue in Orlando, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club. Our P.O. Box 941692 Maitland address. And I looking over the agenda, there's actually very good topics on here. I wasn't going to speak about it, but the unlicensed contractor activity is really very important. My husband and I, we were ripped off by $52,000 this last year by an unlicensed contractor, so that's really important. Back in May,
Ms. Holt, can you speak into the mic? I can barely.
Oh, sure. Is that better?
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Okay.
you.
Back in May, I submitted comments regarding the item B, which is various topics regarding land use and zoning. And so I'm going to be very general on this, but ask that a committee be formed to deal with that. And I guess that would be an environmental committee. I know it was mentioned back in May. And also the rights of the Wekiva River and Econ-Lockahachie River. These are two important waterways and basins in Orange County. And they're both outstanding Florida waters. And we see development and land use issues impacting water quality and the habitat in these areas. So would also recommended that the rights of the Wekiva River, Econ River, be explored as well. So, and I noticed that the growth management, the rezoning, and the other annexation of municipalities. There is the agricultural lands outside of the urban service area pertaining to changing zoning. And then rural land protection, this would be the urban service boundary, and that of directing our development back into the county and fulfilling what we have implemented in the comp plan for infill. There's areas designated. So with that, I thank you and look forward to other meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holt. The next name I have for public comment is Bob Olson. Will you please approach the podium? You have 3 minutes. Please correct your name and give us your address, please.
Good evening. Bob Olson, 2661 Lake Baldwin Lane, Orlando, Florida. I'm speaking in direct support of your agenda item 20046, the ethics issue. We the people, the first 3 words in the preamble of the U.S. Constitution setting out the goals for what our founding fathers wanted the new government to do. It does not say, we the 1%, the ultra-rich who can buy access to government, or we the special interests and lobbyists. It says, we the people. Currently, codes of ethics are set up to limit these types of people in the conduct of our government. In the Florida Constitution, Amendment 2, Section 8 is codified in Chapter 112 of the Florida Statutes. These legal authorities also apply to lower levels of governance in Florida, including Orange County. Approximately one-third of Florida charter counties, representing approximately 75% of the state population of Florida, have codes of ethics that in many cases are more restrictive and definitive than the Florida at the Florida state level. Only 2 of these charter counties list conflicts of interest such as outside employment lobbying that apply to advisory boards. These boards, such as yours, are all appointed by their respective county commissions, which are subject to the same or even more restrictive ethical mandates. However, Orange County specifically excludes all advisory boards from its listed ethical policies per page 6 of the current Orange County Policy Manual. Why is this the case? There is just silence, no answer. Well, silence is not acceptable anymore to we the people. Capture of government regulatory agencies by the regulated entity has become one of the leading problems of governance and voters' disdain in the United States and Orange County. Our current state environmental crisis are not caused by acts of God. They are caused by the failure of government to protect us in the first place and force the taxpayers to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to clean up the mess. Advisory boards such as the CRC are effectively quasi-government entities that have power over we the people. Therefore, they should be subject to the same ethical restrictions regarding conflict of interest, outside employment, lobbying, as our elected and employed government officials. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. The next name I have, and I apologize because I feel like I'm about to mess it up, Rosalind Clouden. I apologize. Will you please correct your name if I said it incorrectly and give us your address as well?
It's
Rosalind.
Rosalind Clouden. And I live on Menominee Court in Orlando. I did not give the street the number because my home address is protected.
That's fair.
So I live in the Pine Hills area. And my concern today is not on your agenda, but my concern today is with code enforcement in the Pine Hills area. We would like to see more strict enforcement of the code violations. We don't know what needs to be done, but even the parking on the front lawn, if we can have changes, and especially with houses where there are septic tanks. The grass, as I understand it, has to be 18 inches before code enforcement gets involved. By that time, it looks like a jungle. And we just seem as if, with code enforcement, we just seem as if we are neglected. We have places like Bravo Supermarket. That parking lot is so many potholes. It's a hazard. You can be driving, trying to get away from the potholes and hit a pedestrian or hit somebody else's car. So these are issues. We want to know if maybe is it because they don't have enough code enforcement officers? You know, what can be done? Maybe they need more officers. We have homes with taps on their roofs, broken windows, broken windows and doors and trash. And, we would like to see Commissioner Siplin has been so helpful, and she is great. But we need code enforcement now to do something, to be more strict and hold homeowners accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clouden. The next name I have is Perry Sedai. I'm sorry. She's not here. The next name I have is Chuck O'Neill. Will you please confirm your name and your address, please? You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Charter Review Commissioners. My name is Chuck O'Neill. My address is 2329 Park Village Place, Apopka, Florida. I am president of Speak Up Wekiva, Inc. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the Wekiva River and Econ-Lockhatchee River Bill of Rights, a proposed amendment to the Orange County Charter. Recently, I sent in a PowerPoint presentation to accompany these comments, but I understand that time is short and I will not be able to give that presentation today. Last week, we observed the 243rd anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. In that document, in the U.S. Constitution, and in the constitutions of numerous states, including Florida, you will find the basis for local community self-government. Indeed, that is why we are here today, to consider amending the Orange County Charter. The drafters of this charter, along with our federal and state constitutions, realized that no mortal man or woman has infinite wisdom or perfect foresight. Certainly at the time the Florida Constitution was written, no one could predict that we would be in a situation where 5 people in the past 2 weeks contracted a flesh-eating bacteria by just walking along the beach. They could not envision the St. Johns River, the Manatee River, the Caloosahatchee River, all plagued by deadly neurotoxins produced by cyanobacteria or blue-green algae. They could not conceive that 86 people would have to be taken to the hospital over a 30-day period for simply touching the water in the St. Lucie estuary. This is why we propose a new course of action, declaring in our charter that the citizens of Orange County have the right to clean water, that the Wekiva River and the Econ River have the right to exist, as well as to be defended in a court of law by citizens of this county. Certainly, rivers that have existed for tens of thousands of years should have an equal right to be represented in court, as does a corporation that we could form online in 10 minutes. The eyes of the world are upon us. 100 million visitors per year who come to enjoy our rivers and beaches want to know what we're going to do to solve our pollution problems. May I suggest we send them a clear and convincing message by placing in our charter that we citizens of Orange County value clean water and that we value these 2 ecosystems upon which our very lives depend.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you.
The next name I have for public comment is Emmett Odell. Will you please correct your name when you present and give us your address? Thank you, Mr. Odell.
My name is Emmett Odell. I live at 717 31st Street, Orlando. I'm here speaking as chairman of Orange County Watch. We're an organization that was established in 1992. Actually, coming out of the CRC at that time, something was pushed through at the last minute without public comment. Both parties were quite upset and formed County Watch. Since 1992, this group has been watching government, reporting on it, and trying to keep everything transparent. What I want to talk to you today about is the process here. This process is something that was promised to the citizens of Orange County, to have a charter review every 4 years to hear the citizens and what they would like to say. Mr. O'Neill, who just spoke, had a complex proposal. I saw the information that came out yesterday or day before, I can't remember which, in an email. That was very comprehensive, and I had tons of questions on that. He was certainly not able to get his point across in 3 minutes. There should be a difference in me getting up and talking 3 minutes on a situation or a problem and someone getting up and speaking on a major proposal. I would look for this Charter Review Commission to look at that for the future of this long period that you're volunteering for the citizens of Orange County, so the citizens of Orange County can be heard about the needs they would like to bring forth in the charter. And I'm not saying every person that gets up and speaks needs visuals and that type of thing, but when you're talking a major proposal, which his was, there needs to be a different setup for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Odell. The next name I have for public comment is Bill Lutz. Will you please confirm your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Bill Lutz, 2618 South Tanner Road, Orlando, Florida. As a rural resident, I'm asking the CRC to protect the future of Orange County by protecting the environment in rural areas, so we don't end up paving over and destroying the environment for future generations in Orange County. To that end, I ask that the CRC form a committee for agenda items B and D. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. The next name I have is Kelly Semrod. I apologize if I said it incorrectly. Will you confirm your name and address for us? You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Semrad. My address is 3111 Amalfi Drive. I'm here tonight to advocate for discussion items CRC 20-043, which is item B, and CRC 20-045, which is item D. The reason that I'm advocating for these items is because with the passing and the governor signing House Bill 7103, it stripped citizens of the ability to hold the county accountable for ill-managed growth. I am a petitioner that sued the county for the Lake Pickett text amendment. We won at the administrative law level. Governor Scott overturned that decision. According to House Bill 7103, myself and the other 5 citizens who sued the county would have been accountable and responsible to pay the legal fees of the prevailing party. When you looked at that courtroom, we had 1 attorney. They had 16. There is absolutely no way we could have afforded. It would have ruined our families financially forever to have to pay those legal fees. That's now a state law. The court already had the ability to award legal fees for frivolous law cases. Now it is mandatory that the prevailing party is awarded the legal fees for the costs of the case. That means no citizen can afford that risk to hold the county accountable for growth management. It makes it absolutely necessary that we include growth management within our charter. Absolutely necessary. People cannot assume that financial risk. They cannot. If the people cannot assume the risk, then who does? There is nobody to hold the county accountable. Not that the county tries to achieve poor growth, but it happens. There are privately led text amendments that are allowed, that allow the developer to pursue changes to the comprehensive land use plan that the commission will vote on. But if it ends up being that it's against the community's will, or it's not compatible or consistent with the community's development patterns, it still is the responsibility of the county to uphold that community. And too often we see that the big money is the prevailer. It's not the people, it's not the community, it's the big money and the special interests. I ask today that the items within B and the items within D make it to a committee. In 2016, I was part of a citizen group that advocated for a supermajority vote when a privately led text amendment impacted the rural lands. Everything was going great for that committee until a bunch of suits showed up and the developers and the attorneys came. We need to have growth management protection for the people in the charter of the county. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Arlene Cuellar. correct me and give me your address, please? I'm sorry.
No worries. My name is Arlene Cuellar, and my address is 258 Acorn Drive, Longwood, Florida. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here today to advocate for the rights of the Wekiwa River and the Conlacache River. Ladies and gentlemen, as a society, we have alienated ourselves from nature, not realizing that we are all a part of that web of life. As the dominant species in that web, it is our responsibility to ensure its survival. The Wekiwa and Econ rivers are not things. They are ecosystems teeming with and supporting life. By granting these two rivers the right to be represented, we would enhance their chances of survival, as well as the survival of the many species they support, our survival, and the survival of future generations. So I ask you to please consider this very important topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next name I have for public comment is Jane Goodard, I believe. Will you please correct your name and you confirm your address? You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
It's Jane Goddard.
I apologize.
Sorry, probably handwriting. And I live at 1402 Sharon Drive in DeLand, Florida. Good evening. Thank you for hearing all of us. I speak to you as a Florida native and a kayaker and also as a lawyer, but I hope you won't hold that against me. I'm here to talk a little bit about the history of ideas in support of the idea of rights for the Wekiwa and for the Econ. And I want to urge you, please, to keep an open mind as you consider this. The Rights of Nature movement seeks to give nature a legal voice, to make nature visible, and to have that voice heard in the court of law. It's a recognition that nature is more than simply property, that it's a thriving, living thing, which needs to be considered when we make decisions, especially when government, especially when government makes decisions. The rights of nature is an idea that is spreading across the United States and across the world. More than 100 communities have given it consideration. And although it sounds kind of crazy and out there when you first hear about it, it's actually an idea that makes a lot of sense, especially because by protecting natural systems such as the Wekiwa and the Econ, we're actually protecting ourselves, as well as all the beings that depend on the river and on the waters of Florida. So I want to urge you to think about this deeply, to sit with it, to recognize that this movement finds its impetus and its inspiration in the rights of women, in the suffrage movement, and also in the civil rights movement, where we recognize segments of the population that did not have rights, whose rights were not recognized, that we were missing something by not recognizing those rights. And I'm sure that women having the vote was something that sounded pretty crazy when it was first proposed. But as we know, that's something that we were simply missing, that society was simply missing. And those contributions were being lost. The same thing with the civil rights movement. It sounds difficult. It sounds maybe impossible. But we can do difficult things. We can do challenging things when they're the right thing to do. So I urge you to give this time to percolate, become familiar with it. People have been asking to send it to committee. I think that would be a great idea to allow deeper study of it, because many communities are moving this forward. It's an idea that time has come, and it's also the wave of the future. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you will consider it.
Thank you, Ms. Goddard. The next name I have for public comment, the last name I believe is Mali, and I apologize, you have really nice handwriting. Will you confirm your name and your address for me?
That's Debbie Maley.
Debbie Maley, got it.
At 6001 Condor Road in Orla Vista. I'm the chair of the Orla Vista United Safe Neighborhood and the treasurer of the Orla Vista Chamber of Commerce. We're concerned about annexation. The city's creeping up on us, and they're taking us bite by bite. And we are very, very happy in the county. The county commission is very responsive to our needs. The sheriff is great, and we don't want to belong to the city. And we would like you to do anything you can possibly do to keep them from getting us. We're what you call that antiquated subdivision. We've been platted since in 1921, and we would like to stay unincorporated Orange County. So anything you could do to keep that, we would appreciate it. And as the other people were talking about the rivers and that, our environment is very important to us, and anything you can do to keep that safe, we appreciate that too.
Thank you. The next name that I have before me for public comment is Trini, I apologize, Quiros. Phone a friend. Will you please confirm your name, address, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Trini Quiros. That will be 1750 Green Meadow Lanes, Orlando, Florida. I'm here because 4 years ago, we, the citizens, as I heard previously speak, took part on what is supposed to be an engagement of the people and the representatives of those who are elected to do what they swore in a Bible when they took office to do for the community. But sometimes that doesn't happen, or it takes forever and ever until new faces and new people come. We are sick and tired of waiting 10 years for a census to tell us how a community must be divided and served properly, or a charter review committee of 15 people who listens to 2 to 3 minutes, and it goes in one ear and it goes in the other, because sometimes they may not even vote the will of the people. With me, what you see is what you get. At the last charter, I proposed changing the 6 commissions that we have and making it larger into 8, because as it is right now, with over 1,400,000 people, each commission or district has an overpopulation of 237,000. It's not manageable. It's impossible. Smaller population counties have 6 and sometimes 7 commissioners. And let's take the example of the city of Orlando. Not even 280,000 people, and they have 6 commissioners. And it's not even manageable at that. We, the people, demand. We are not asking to do the right thing and open the districts from 6 to 8, and with the mayor will be the 9, so that we, the people, can have representation that is doing something and not just whatever. We have a population of homeless people that is increasing by the week, not a month. There is nothing being done. Yeah, there are chairs, there are planners, there are committees, everything goes blah, 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 blah. We want action. And so I will be coming from now on to talk about that, and I hope that this charter listens to the people, because the next time we will bring more people. Thank you.
Thank you. The next name I have is John Lena for public comment. Will you confirm your name and address? You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, committee members. My name is John Lina, L-I-N-A. I live at 3651 Oriskany Drive, Orlando, Florida, 32820. I'm here tonight representing Save Orange County. I'm the chairman for Save Orange County. And I wanted just to reference the letter that I read into the record at the last meeting. Thank you for taking that into consideration. And I want to emphasize the discussion items B and D somehow make it into to the subcommittee level, where we, you're familiar with our story and our background, and we're getting turned away at almost every avenue that we try to pursue. And I do understand. I'm a military officer. I work for the federal government. There has to be a balance, and I understand that. But right now, the balance is way out of kilter right now. From all of my dealings when I first joined Save Orange County, I studied the Growth Management Act way back in the day. We're in close contact with the Florida League of Cities, 1,000 Friends of Florida. And the one thing that I realized was back in the day there was a good balance going on with the way the Growth Management Act was written a while back. When the recession hit, Governor Scott pulled away one of the levels out of that Growth Management Act to kind of tilt it toward development, to get the economy going back, get people's jobs going back again, and it's understandable. But the problem is, when everything came back, he didn't reinsert that level of review back into the plan or the act to give it balance again. And so that was out of balance. And then this last legislative cycle, as Ms. Semrad alluded to, the passage of House Bill 7103 just totally destroyed any balance that was there beforehand. And we want to emphasize that there, when people say smart growth, there's so many definitions of smart growth out there, but we want to recognize some balanced smart growth, especially in the rural areas, because they are going to come in there and chew that up like termites. And we got a letter from John Micah, the House of Representatives, federal representative, and he said in his letter that once this land is turned, there's no getting it back. And we're talking about Lake Pickett South, Lake Pickett North. That's a recharge area for the aquifer that is now going to be paved over to the tune of as many as 15 units per acre. So that's what we're facing. We're asking you to help us get some balance back into the equation and consider items B and D to get to the subcommittee level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lina. The next name I have for public comment is Steve Myers. Will you please confirm your name and address? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Steve Myers, 1105 East Concord Street, Orlando, 32803. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing in Orlando for 31 years, grew up here. I want to speak in favor of the rights of nature, the Wekiva and the Econ rights of nature specifically. We have no local democracy when it comes to environmental matters. That sounds like a radical statement, but I can prove it's not, and here's why. If a corporation, oil company, pipeline company, fracking company, developer, Nestle, wants to come in, they want to drill, they want to inject fracking wastewater, they want to suck the water out of our local aquifer, no matter how well intentioned, there's nothing the local government can do to stop them. I don't care if we have all environmentalists on our city commission or county commission. There's almost nothing they can do to stop this. And here's why. First of all, as an activist will hear about this. They'll go to their local rep, and the local rep will say, I'm sorry, you've got to contact your state rep. So we contact our state representative. State rep says, hey, thanks, you're a good citizen. Show up. There's a state regulatory hearing coming up in a month. We contact Sierra Club. Sierra Club says, thank you for calling. Love to hear this. Love to take your call. There's going to be a regulatory hearing coming up on this issue. And we call the company, the oil company, the pipeline company, the developer, and they say, we want to be a good corporate partner. And we want to work with you. And there's a committee, regulatory agency meeting coming up. But the fraud of all this is that there may be a dozen good reasons to stop these things. Water pollution, air pollution, effect on property values, dozens of reasons injecting fracking wastewater, for example, or paving over the headwaters of the Little Wekiva River, like it is going on right now, is a bad idea. But then you go down the state regulatory chute, the funnel, and what we find out is that in many of these cases, there's going to be one or two issues that are defined by the regulatory agency. None of these other things are discussed. And the regulatory agency, for the most part, have been appointed by the powerful, and the regulations have been written by the industries that they're supposed to regulate. I've got 20 seconds left. Can I have another 2 minutes?
No.
All right, well, I'm coming back next time. I'm going to take 10 seconds. The local government can't do anything about it because there's state preemption. You have corporations that have personhood. So if you sue the if they take their land because under the Constitutional Commerce Clause, it's property, they can file a lawsuit against the local commission.
Thank you for your time,
and
Mr.
a
Myers.
1983 action, civil rights violations, because corporations have personhood.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next name I have for speaking is Perry Sadai. And as she approaches the podium, I have 2 names left for public comment. If you intended to speak at today's meeting and have not provided a public comment slip to one of our staff members, you are about to be out of time. We are taking comment on the entirety of the agenda during this public comment moment. So, again, we have a staff member in the back. If you want to speak, this is your last chance for today's meeting. Will you correct me on your name, pronunciation, give us your address? You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
It was close enough.
Okay.
It's actually Perry Sedek, and I'm a resident in Seminole County, and I work in Orange County. I'm a professor at Valencia, and I'm also an attorney, and I practice frequently in Orange County. I'm here tonight. First of all, let me just say, I can't do anything in 3 minutes. I don't even think I can put on my shoes in 3 minutes, but I'm going to do the best I can. We've heard a lot of people talk about the rights of nature, and I'm here as well to advocate for the same thing. A few people said it's kind of a radical idea. A few people said it's not. I'm here to say that there's really actually nothing radical about it. It's actually very practical. This morning, when I opened the newspaper, I saw flesh-eating bacteria. I saw water that had human waste in it. Another body of water that had green algae, another body that had runoff from cattle ranches. And everybody knows this is a problem, but nobody knows what to do about it. In the past, if somebody would harm the land or a body of water, there really wasn't recourse because you need to have what's called standing in order to do that. So if we put the rights of nature on the ballot, it would actually give the citizens standing, and not only to address a harm after it happens, but perhaps more importantly, to prevent a harm. It's very hard to differentiate the rights of nature with the right of people. We all want the right to go swimming in clean water, drink clean water. So it's difficult to separate. And a good analogy is people, because we have a hard time putting parameters on nature, but if all of us here tonight were in a big boat and some of us were fixing the engine, swabbing the deck, setting the sails, I don't really know boat life, but I think that's what they do, and you had other people somewhere on the boat drilling holes into it, we would say, there's definitely something wrong. We can't have people harming the boat. And that's exactly what happens when people are harming nature. A lot of times it's the big corporations, and it's hard to really tell where the harm comes from. So I think that much like the boat, we need to all make sure that we have a method in place, because as some of the other people and Mr. Myers have said, there's really nothing in place now to prevent that. All this really does is give standing to address these issues. So it's common, it's practical. Orange County would be a great vehicle for that because they've been very progressive in the past, doing things that other counties and states and countries have looked at. So when we do little things like banning styrofoam and those are just little Band-Aids. We need to really address the big picture and have a method to address it and have remedy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. The next name I have for public comment is Todd Catella. Will you please confirm your name and your address as you come to the podium? You have 3 minutes.
It's Todd Catella, 162 Mercado, Orlando, 32807. I appreciate the environment. It's not uncommon for me to take a trip over to the beach and catch a sunrise. When I go to Denver, Colorado, to see my son, we take some beautiful hikes in the mountains. I love doing the kinds of things that are out in nature and having nature trails, having areas of environment. It's not uncommon for my wife and I to go to a state park in the state of Florida. And, you know, the Florida wildlife is all the same. You've got the palms, there's not a whole lot of difference between one area and another as far as the appearance of it, but we still enjoy our hikes. So keeping a good representation of ecology is important. At the same time, Orange County is growing. We can't stop that. I moved here in 1967, and picture even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where Orange County was, where iDrive was. It was completely different than it is today. And 20 years from now, 30 years from now, is going to be completely different than it is now. So, yes, we have to have a balance of preserving nature and parks and some wildlife areas and some areas that the community can go to that they can enjoy and share with their children and their future generations. But at the same time, we have to grow. So whatever policies that the Planning Zoning Board puts together and the Board of County Commissioners put together to protect that, that's their role. That's why we elected them. So the purpose of the Charter Review Commission is not necessarily to give. We have to look at where your role is and where the role of putting amendments on the ballot is, and where the responsibility of elected officials that are currently in office are, and what their responsibilities are. We elect those people for these purposes. So I don't see where amendments to our charter is necessary for certain things that are growth management. I believe that the Board of County Commissioners, the Planning and Zoning Board, the people that we put in place there are the place for that. And we elect them based on hoping that they're going to have common sense in that growth plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next name that I have for public comment is Barbara Anderson. Will you please approach the podium, confirm your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Barbara Anderson. I live at 114 North John Street. My parents lived on Hillcrest in downtown Orlando when I was born at what is now the Executive Airport, which was an Army Air Force base in World War I and World War II. No, I was born during World War II. I'll be 77 this year. I wasn't prepared to speak today. I did not know about this meeting until, I guess, yesterday. I live in Orla Vista. I grew up in Orla Vista. The house that I live in, my father actually built with his hands. My family history goes back to the 1780s in the state of Florida. I have seen in my lifetime so many changes, and they're not all for the good. The Wekiva Springs areas, watershed area there in what is Lake Lawn. My grandparents owned property there, cow pasture, when I was a child. That water feeds the Wekiva River, yet we are developing so to run that. Here our county commissioners are just thinking about West Side Manor. When I was a child of about 9, 10 years old, I went over there with a girlfriend in the 50s, middle 50s. Everywhere. I don't care if you went to Maitland, Winter Park. And by the way, I owned a home in Winter Park, and that's where I raised my daughter. And on a sidetrack here, my daughter just moved out of the state of Florida to get away from everything. All the things that were so familiar to her are gone, and she's in Tennessee now. Bought a home there and sold her home. Here they did in one day. But anyway, I know I'm going off subject here, but it just shows that many people are leaving our area because of the changes, and we can't stop it. But going back to Lake Lawn, my grandfather sold that property to a developer, and he built the first low-income housing for people of color at that time in the 50s. My family owns property in East Orange County. We can't do anything with it because people don't want us to do anything with it but keep our trees for them to look at. That's agricultural land. But we cannot burn the underbrush any longer for those pine trees to be healthy. Every time I go out there, I am in tears seeing the shape of those trees. They're not even suitable to produce paper.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. We
And
appreciate
just one
your
more
time.
comment. If
No, ma'am.
you want
ma'am.
to
3
use our
minutes,
property,
ma'am.
you need to buy
Thank
it.
you.
and pay fair price.
The next name that I have for public comment, and is the last name on the list for today, Vicky Vargo, I believe is the correct pronunciation, maybe not. And will you please confirm your name, address? You have 3 minutes.
I'm Vicky Vargo. I live at 3800 Winged Foot Court, 32808. So there's a couple of things which I want to address. First, the water quality. So as has been stated, Lake Lawn, Lake Orlando, and Lake Fairview are all the headwaters for the Wekiva River District. And we see an awful lot of attention, and it all flows downstream, and we see an awful lot of attention in Seminole County for protection and money, but the headwaters for the Wekiva is really lacking. So we would like to see something in the charter that would help fortify and purify those headwaters. Second is the urban services area. Now, this may not be something for the charter, but I can tell you that in the 32808 and the 32818 areas that the code enforcement is notorious. So in the months of April and May, we reported over 3,000 code violations, just in 32808 alone. So that might be something more inclined for the commission rather than the Charter Review Commission, rather the Orange County Commissioners. But I think the water quality issue is something that's important. So one of the things that we have in 32808 and 32818 is septic tanks. Now, that both the health department and the water management districts advise people against parking on septic tanks. However, the Orange County Code Enforcement has no regulations or recommendations at all as to not parking on septic tanks, most of which are in the front yard. So that is one area of concern that I'd like for the Charter Review Commission to look at, is the parking on septic tanks, and if that couldn't be a county-wide mandate as it relates to water quality. It's my understanding that the St. John's Water Management District has already come to the Pine Hills community and said, we want you to go on, city, urban water and sewer, and that just isn't going to happen anytime soon. So if there's any way that we can address parking on septic tanks in the front yard, that would be something I would appreciate this commission taking into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the public comment portion of our meeting. I want to say that I really appreciate, and I know that my colleagues here appreciate the time and energy that you have put into making sure that your voice is heard. We value your contributions and definitely take them into account. So we appreciate you taking the time to value the work that we do here because we think it's mutual. Moving on to our agenda item, consent item 3A, is the approval and execution of the minutes for our June 5th, 2019 regular business meeting of the Charter Review Commission. Is there a motion with respect
Chair,
to the
I
minutes?
move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion made by Member Nguyen, a second by Vice Chair Torres. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll now move into the discussion item portion of our agenda. For each of these items, A, B, C, and D, and E, we will have our General Counsel present the topic to us, and then we will bring it forward for consideration.
Madam Chair, do you want me to do it from here, or do you want me to go up to the podium?
I'd prefer you at the podium, please, sir. Hopefully your shoes are comfortable.
Well, I didn't wear my cowboy boots today, so we'll see. All right, the first item that we have today is item A. It says proposed charter review topic, number and composition of county commission districts. So let's jump into a simple one. It was addressed in every charter review commission since 2000. It was rejected each time before or after the topic was evaluated. There is a relevant consideration that I would bring to your attention when you discuss this item, and that is that we obviously have the upcoming 2020 census, and that's significant. If you read the backup materials, you saw a memo from Attorney Whitney Evers in which she pointed out one of the considerations in redistricting or adding districts is a maximum deviation 10% rule. And at least the data that was provided at that time was that the districts were all within that maximum deviation range of less than 10% from district to district. In 2020, when the census is completed, we will have a better idea of where we are now. So there may be reason to consider whether or not this is the right time to attack that issue, but it's certainly within your discretion. I raise that as a relevant consideration because in my role as General Counsel, there are things I'm going to tell you that I'm aware of, but that I'm not advocating one way or the other. So I want to make that clear to you and also to the people here. You will hear me tonight talk about other things which are pros and cons, and I'm using the words as argued. When I say that, that means based on the information that I saw, either prior reports or whatever, minutes and whatnot, I can tell you what people have said about the pros and the cons of these events. I am not telling you that I think they're good or bad either way. The pros that were argued for this previously are it provides greater responsiveness to a larger population. It increases minority representation. It's relatively low cost of adding additional districts versus a $3.6 billion budget. As a voter issue, the question was raised, what's the harm in putting it to the voters? The cons that were argued were that it dilutes the power of individual commissioners and districts, that the districts could become more self-interested than interested in the county as a whole approach. The upfront costs are also recurring costs, the salaries of the commissioners, the staff, and all the things that are needed to provide for the needs of a commissioner doing the job. There is no guarantee that any of the new districts would be majority districts, which means a district in which the minority is the majority. There's no compelling reason to do this. Again, that was argued. And the current commissioners have said, and I think we've heard at least that once here, if not more, that they are not overloaded or unresponsive. So those are the pros and cons for that item. And that's for that introduction.
Thank you. We have in the agenda packet that was distributed a number of materials that explain the evaluation of the topic as done before and what's been submitted thus far. At this point, my question is there a motion to create to have the number and composition of county commission districts established as an evaluation topic for the 2020 CRC.
Can we have a discussion before that?
I'd like to ask if there's a motion, and then we will move into discussion. Because if you recall, we'll have discussion once there's a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion with discussion, if I could, please.
I second that.
So your motion is
To establish, correct.
There's a motion by Member Smith to establish the number and composition of county commission districts as a evaluation topic. There's a second by Member Mims. Discussion. I do not have cue boxes here today, so you all bear with me. Member Alfont asked for discussion first, so I'll go with him.
I'm going to start with this premise. If it's not broken, you don't need to fix it. I think that's what came out from the last commissions, and I think at this point there is going to be another CRC in 2020 who will have the census, who will have the knowledge if this is really needed. But I'm going to say this as a minority. The last thing our council said to me is the thing that has concerns and a lot of us, which is that at the end of the day, we could put 8 districts on the ballot, but it's the county commissioners who are going to decide how it's divided, and that, as the only member probably in this table who has created maps for the school boards, to create a minority-majority district is hardly difficult. And I can tell you right now that if you go to 8, you're going to end up with maybe 3 minority-majority districts, and that's stretching it. Because if you take District 6 and you try to divide it into 2 majority districts, it's not going to happen. So I just want to put that out since we're having discussion. I want that out clear. But at this point, my biggest objection is that we don't have the census. We have a committee that's going to meet in 2020. Let them address that issue. Thank you.
And just to help me with cues, because I don't have a cue box, I'll ask that you all raise your hands because I don't even have. Okay, I'll be with you in a moment. Mr. Miller. Barely.
Barely.
It seems to me, but correct me if I'm wrong, that as far as the census is concerned, I mean, aren't we talking about apples and oranges? Redistricting is not the same as creating more districts. So more districts could be created, and then those districts could be redistricted. Is that correct? And based on whatever the results of the census are.
Well, the answer is you could create them, but effective when? So to your point, if the idea was, I guess depends on how the amendment is, that they would be effective after the census, then that's perhaps a possibility. We'd look at the legality of it. The reason why it's a concern is because typically when amendments are passed, they're effective immediately. And the reason that's significant is because of that 10% rule that allows you to avoid judicial scrutiny. So that means that every district has to be essentially, in terms of population, within 10% of the next district. And so the new numbers for the census would tell you where the people are.
Right, I get that, but it doesn't prohibit, because there is going to be a redistricting mechanism based on whatever the results of the census are. So it still does not prohibit us from moving forward with the question of whether we should be creating more districts. And the other thing that I'd like to say is that from my review of the historical information, I mean, this topic has come up for so many charter review commissions, going back, I think, to 2000, if I'm not mistaken. And also, if I'm not mistaken, the last 2 charter review commissions, the workshop committees, and also the mayor at the time advocated and said that this should be brought to the voters. It was the full commission that decided in both cases not to. So there were recommendations from those work groups that heard all the information. So that to me is a pretty compelling argument.
Member Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we were to specifically say we're going to designate what you're going to do in certain areas, when the voters go to the polls, who's to say you're going to get what you think you're asking for? And before they were saying they wanted 2 minority districts in the Hispanic community. Now we have 2 Hispanic commissioners. And if you were to designate, what about other minority people who would be left out? So we don't know what the census is going to say. Really, I've been working with this for quite a while too, since the last 2 charters. And each time, we don't have the last say. It goes to the Board of County Commissioners. And then if the county commissioner want to push it on to the voters, yes, but the voters have the last say. But we don't know what's going to happen in the next upcoming census, as you mentioned before. So why not wait until the census comes out? Because we could be shooting ourselves in the foot thinking you're going to get one thing and you don't.
Vice Chair Torres is after Member Staccato. He asked me a moment ago. Member Staccato, it's your turn.
Well, the Bureau of Economics from the University of Florida has put our numbers around 1.4 million people in Orange County today. We're growing at 1,000 a week approximately, so that's 52,000 per year. That's Winter Park every year. So in 2 years, if the voters vote for this next November and they put it in, by the time we get to draw the maps, we'll have 104,000 more people in this county. We're pushing within 3 years we'll be at 1.7 million, and I don't see that stopping. So I fully think that we do need to address it. The citizens have spoken to this, and they want to do something. Mayor Jacobs voted for this in the last time. She supported it, but the board didn't support it. But the citizens certainly, when you go through all the paperwork for the last 20 years, they certainly did support it. It's just, it got stopped. I don't think the representation is that good at this point because they're almost the size of congressional districts at this point. And this is our local politics. This is the person that represents you at the most local level. So to have a 227,000 representation per person is a huge task. So that's why originally 4 months ago I put in about bringing it down to 125 or a maximum of 15 members on the board at some point. So basically try to get down to what the concept what the Congress does. Now, there was talk about, well, what about the census? We should wait. Well, we know University of Florida does a pretty good job on counting numbers, and all the developers who might be sitting here use those numbers quite nicely and throw in our face as environmentalists. So I think we should address it, at least in a committee, talk about it as a back and forth and come with a suggestion. We can always rebalance the numbers. Let's say we go for a new district for 2 more or 4 more, whatever the number is. We're smart people. We can rebalance it. It's not difficult to rebalance stuff. Draw the maps. It's a political thing, but we can do it. I have the faith that our system can handle it, and I certainly think we should address it. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Torres.
Yes, Madam Chair. I want to thank the attorney for bringing the information that actually we all received and read. And yes, this came up in 2012, came up in 2016, and I think it's going to continue to come up until we actually address it. I agree with my colleague here, Jeffrey, and also Staccato. The mayor actually did say that she would vote for something like this because she saw the vision of the increase in population. This is not about minority, majority districts. Yes, we happen to have 3 new county commissioners who happen to be Hispanic. But it's not about that. It's about representative government and being able to address the citizens of each and every one of those districts when they have a need. And so the bigger they are, the less that county commissioner is going to be able to address the needs of those constituents. So I feel, Madam Chair, that we should really take a look at this subject. The last review stated if we took it on and we put it on the ballot for a vote, it wouldn't be implemented until 2 years down the road, which would be the same exact thing that could happen now. If we have a committee, we take a vote, and it passes, gets on the ballot in 2020. This will not be implemented until possibly 2022, after the census and the redistricting and reapportionment has taken place.
Member Smith?
All right, so I just wanted to clear the air a little bit just to make sure that we're all on the same page and our citizens do understand what we're doing here. So right now we're having a conversation, and Chair Evans, please correct me if I'm wrong. We're having a conversation on, first, we wanted to make sure that this was a topic that we wanted to even discuss or bring to the table, and now we're having a dialogue in order for us to move forward and decide on whether this is something that we wanted to break off into a subcommittee, or we're wanting to discuss and make an agreement as a whole CRC. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there first, and then
Are you asking me for clarity on that?
Yeah, and then I have two other things.
Okay, do you want that answer now?
Yes, please.
The evaluation process that we walked through and that we posted online lays that out. What we are doing, and as we will do with each of the discussion items listed here, is we will first if there is a motion and a second, we will call, after discussion, call the question of whether or not the items listed there become a evaluation topic. The next step in the process, as laid out in that evaluation process that's posted online on our charter website, says that we will then take a vote if there needs to be a committee for that topic. And then if that is the case, we'll establish a committee. And then ultimately, either the CRC as an entire body or that committee will come through work through the process of evaluating any topic that is in fact approved as an evaluation topic, and come forward with a recommendation that ultimately the entire CRC would make a vote on later on in the process.
Beautiful. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
And I just asked that to make sure we're all on the same page, because we're having conversations, and really our conversations are not because we're making a decision as to this is something that needs to go on the ballot right now. It's just a conversation that we're having amongst each other so that we can better make a decision on whether it needs to be a subcommittee. And so having said that, I think I want to agree with many of members here with the fact that it has been presented to us, this particular topic, on several occasions. It is an opportunity, if we do move forward into forming a subcommittee, it's a great opportunity for us to discuss and see if there's opportunities for growth and representation. Because I believe what I'm hearing when I go into the communities is, is it a challenge? Is it a struggle? Do we feel like there's no representation within our districts? And so if that is a challenge, if that is a struggle, maybe that's a topic that we need to discuss a little further and find out and get more information, more details, so that we can have a better conversation and move forward with that. And then I have a question, or maybe this question will come up as a subcommittee is having more discussion. When we are talking about district lines, when we are talking about forming districts, who draws the line for that once we reorganize the district? So that's a whole nother conversation that will have to come up. So this is just the beginning, and I had to say that because I don't want anyone sitting and listening and watching to feel as if this is, the end of it and the decision is going to be made today.
Do I have any other members who want to have a comment before? Member Fouth.
Just a couple of comments. Is this working?
Yeah, his mic is not working.
Just a couple of quick comments. The first is that we shouldn't stall movement on this waiting for the 2020 census. That's a direct count, and that is, even by the U.S. Census Bureau's own recommendation, the least accurate estimator of the population. We've got good estimates right now. They're probably better than what we'll get out of the direct count. And so there's no reason to stall on those grounds. The other thing that folks need to be aware of is that Orange County's growth has been pretty steady. When you hear numbers thrown out like 1,000 people a week are moving here, yeah, it might be 1,000 people a week coming in. What it doesn't include is the people who are moving out and people who unfortunately are dying. And so the growth rate is about 2% a year. The problem is that we don't have just 500,000 people in the county anymore. We've got 1.2 million. And so when we double, in about 30 years, we're going to double from 1.2 to 2.4 million. It's that base number that's going to strangle us. Yes, the increase is going to affect some areas. So you've got East Orange County where that rate of increase is about 8%. That means that the population in that part of the county is going to double in 9 years, less than a decade. So we're going to have, unless we get a hold of the growth, some real problems with growth management here and also with representation. And we can address the representation very effectively, I think, if we put a committee together and get this on the ballot. It's been a long time people have asked for this.
Any other members seeking comment? Member Mims?
Council, question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
And the research, are there any other counties that has implemented where they have added any type of commissioners and they've kind of worked out the quirks and things of that nature of redistricting, basically, you know, the foreseeability of what we're facing? I agree with the members here. I am I'm a proponent of adding, but it seems as though we're kind of throwing around several variables such as, you know, the census and then, you know, just the population, the redistricting and becoming a minority and majority district. Are there any other counties that we can kind of use as a model to see where they have added those additional commissioners? And then are those costs, I know in your packet here, and thank you so much, it's very detailed. I know that those costs of, I think it said about $688,000 would be added to the budget. Are those then spread over those new districts, or are they spread abroad, or how does that just kind of give us a rooftop perspective?
Well, starting with the first question, I'm sure the answer to your question is yes, but I will not be able to identify which ones tonight. I can bring that back to you actually probably before the end of next week by just sending you out the email through Katie. But at the end, the answer is yes. Clearly, people have added districts to their counties before. And in terms of the counts and the other issues, the census helps give you a number for the county. And then from that, depending on, again, I'm not disputing what's said here, and I want to reinforce, I'm not advocating anything. I'm just giving you the information. But what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to be able to drill down, too, to where that population is located within the county. How good it is, how accurate it is. I mean, you know, there's a big controversy now about the whole idea of do you ask the citizenship question or not, and how will that affect it? I don't have any answers to those questions. But yes, it has happened. Yes, they work their way through it. And as long as they stay within that 10% margin regarding how the population is, and not otherwise in a strangely shaped district that doesn't pass muster and various other things, then it generally is going to be upheld if it's challenged. But right now, the bigger point of the census, again, and I'm not assuming it's accurate, but if you're willing to make the assumption that it's at least somewhat accurate, it tells you not only how many, but where they are, so you would know when you got to that point how to draw the lines. Could you vote the districts in advance, or could the voters? Sure, but it would be if the county went about trying to draw them right away, they might end up drawing them again, and it's a long exercise. It's a lot of work, as someone up here knows, to do that. So yes, you can do it. Now the second question was, are the costs going to be spread out just in the districts that are created, or are they going to be for the county? The county's budget is based on tax dollars for everybody in the county. And so then it goes into a fund and it's allocated accordingly. So it's not going to be, oh, well, if I have a new district, that's all going to be funded out of that district. The salary of one commissioner is not paid from his or her district. It's paid from the county at large. So everybody's going to share whatever the additional burden would be.
Okay, so the additional, just to be clear, the additional $688,000 or $646,000 would then be into the county's fund and
Correct.
Spread allocated. Okay. Just wanted to make sure, because those are concerns when you're speaking to individuals. They'd like to know how those things are. But thank you so much for clarifying.
Yes, ma'am.
I've got a request for speaking from Member Staccardo.
When I was doing some research, I found a cross-reference of districts and what they are in per county. The Broward has 9. Duval has up to 14. Miami-Dade, where was it? 13. So there are a number of counties that have larger numbers than we have. There's also like Leon has a mixture of 5, 2, depending on how they, I guess they have something. Also, Pinellas has up to 7, and Volusia has up to 7. So there's a number of counties that have pretty large commissions, even though they might be smaller than our county. And so I'll also point out we set these numbers back in the 80s, I think, when we initially created our charter and everything in 88. So it's been 31 years. So I think we've doubled since then. So anyways, that more data.
Thank you. Member Alphonse?
I just have one question to our legal counsel.
Can you speak into your microphone, please?
Yes, I'm trying. At the end of the day, 6, 8, the lines are decided by the commissioners. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
And again, they're going to have to figure out where the populations are to make sure they stay within that 10% number. And one of the things I would point out now, only because it's going to become relevant to later discussions, is that there's been some requests amongst, I guess, some of the people here as well for the idea of a supermajority vote on certain things. So you need to think about that, because which is harder? And I guess it's all a matter of perspective. Is it harder on a supermajority to go to get 5 out of 7 or 6 out of 9? Because 6 out of 9 is a supermajority, and so is 5 out of 7. And so you could make an argument, particularly if you're on the supermajority side, that you'd be better off if supermajority was your issue, trying to get 5 out of 7 than 6 out of 9. Depends on how you view it.
Vice Chair Torres?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what the budget is now? Because when I was reading this, it stated back in the day, I think this was 2016's report.
3.6.
It was $3.6 billion.
Don't know what it is today.
You don't know what it is today. The reason why I brought that up was because while they were talking about this, they said that the relatively small costs outweighed by the enhancement of the representation of the counties. And that was, what, 4 years ago? So I was just curious what the budget was now.
My best guess would be it's gone up because the cost of everything has generally gone up, but what it would be, I don't know. It's not, I think the point, and again, this was argued on both sides. The pros said it's low cost of adding additional districts versus the thin $3.6 billion budget. The cons said, yeah, but it's an ongoing cost, and it'll be that way every year, and it'll continue to increase. You know, apples, oranges, potatoes, however you see it. I don't know the actual number. You can, I think, fairly assume that the numbers will go up to some level, but whether they are going to be in anything that is a significant impact on a yearly budget that's already in the billions, probably not, but it depends on how you view significant.
Thank you.
Member Staccardo.
Data point, I just Googled Orange County net. 4.2 billion was proposed budget for 2018-19. So 4.2 now. I think that's correct too.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to be heard on this before we call the question?
Madam Chair, I have a question in reference to what's going to happen with the procedure, the evaluation process.
Yes, ma'am.
If I may, because I know we're going to be putting the question out there. Number 4, I know we're moving forward with talking about subcommittees. On number 4 of the evaluation process that was provided, and thank you so much for outlining everything we've talked about probably in the last 2 or 3 meetings, to be able to put some order to this process. But number 4 does talk about that members' subcommittees shall be considered by the chair when making assignments, but the members' interests shall not be the sole determining factors for subcommittee assignments. So I was kind of wondering if there's any way to clarify if there is a particular criteria that we're using to determine who's going to be on which subcommittee.
No, I've just taken into account the commentary at the meetings here, and then from this meeting and prior meetings from our members and what may have been submitted by them to CRC staff.
Okay, thank you.
But to be clear, the assignments are not solely based on what your interests are. We all are here to represent all, 1.4 million members of the county and all the issues that come before the CRC. And so our service is to everything that comes up, not necessarily the things that we're most passionate about. At this time, I believe we're ready to call the question. Given the need to make sure that we're clear on whether or not something actually meets the majority for moving forward, I'm going to ask our clerk to call the roll for the vote, and we will go from there.
Before we do that, could you repeat the motion?
Sure, I'll repeat the motion. The motion to be that we are voting for is whether or not the number and composition of county commission districts is established as a charter review topic for the 2020 CRC.
Madam Chair, is this for discussion?
Actually, no, discussion was just about to be over. Do you have something you want to share with us?
No.
Okay, we're ready to call the vote, the question. I'm sorry, I have member Afont. You want to speak?
Yeah, I have a point of order because are we going to be doing voting now on 1A or all the A section? Just so
Everything on A.
Okay, just so I'm clear. Okay. Member Afont? No. Member Douglas? Yes. Member Drake?
Yes.
Chair Evans?
No.
Member Foth?
Yes.
Member Miller?
Yes.
Member Mims?
Yes.
Member Smith?
Yes.
Member Steinhauer?
No.
Member Staccardo?
Yes.
Vice Chair Torres?
Yes.
Member Wynn?
No.
Passes 8-4.
Thank you. So the next question before the CRC is whether or not the number and composition of county commission districts should be a matter handled by a specific subcommittee, or if it's be something that is handled by the entirety of the CRC. Is there a motion regarding establishing a committee?
Also move.
We have a motion by member Alphonse. Is there a second?
I second it.
I didn't hear who was second.
You-
Member Staccardo with
Yeah.
the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, can we call the question, please?
Member Afont? Yes. Member Douglas? Yes. Member Drake?
Yes.
Chair Evans?
Yes.
Member Foth? Yes. Member Miller?
Yes.
Member Mims?
Yes.
Member Smith?
Yes.
Member Steinhauer?
Yes.
Member Staccardo?
Yes.
Member Vice Chair Torres?
Yes.
Member Wynn?
Yes.
Unanimous.
All right. We have established that the CRC intends to establish a committee. I will assign the committee members now. Just so you all know, I will establish the committee members and the chair. The time slot to be used by the committee will be established by the chair and coordinated with charter staff. Included on the documents available on Legistar for our meeting and also on our CRC website is a schedule of the time slots that are available for committees. Those will be, one of those time slots will be the ones that will be utilized by this committee, which will be determined by the chair of that committee. The number and composition of the BOCC, the committee that I'm going to establish for that issue, is Vice Chair Carmen Torres as the chair of that committee. We will also have member Dottie Wynn as a member of that committee, member Russell Drake, a member of that committee, member Suarez, a member of that committee, and member Klein as a member of that committee. We have made it through the first issue. We are now on to discussion item B.
All right, Madam Chair, this item is made up of actually several items, and because of the way that it was lined up on the agenda, some of the things that were presented by the Sierra Club seem to overlap with some things by Member Staccato. If I skip something, it's an accident, let me know and I'll come back to it, but I think I've got it all down here. So the first on the list was the idea of having if there's an upzoning from an agricultural area, an agriculturally zoned area that is outside the urban service areas area, that it would go to a referendum vote. At least that's how I understood the materials that I had. Now, there wasn't any charter sections that were specified to review. It's never been reviewed by the Charter Review Commission before, so there's no action that has been taken on this topic, and there's not any additional information. I can tell you, however, just from the nature of the topic, that one of the concerns, again, these are concerns, I'm not advocating, but clearly you can see how this would raise property rights concern, and we heard that already here. The lady who was from Orla Vista and said, I've got all this property and y'all want to tell me what to do with it, you ought to buy it. And that is exactly the way to define the issue. If you've had a farm forever outside of the urban services area and you realize you could retire and make some money and sell that valuable asset, but it would be much more valuable as housing as opposed to agriculture, you're going to get pushback. That's the concern to raise to you, but how you handle that is up to you.
You want to go ahead with all of them?
Oh, well, they're pretty complicated, but if you want me to do that now, I will. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so in addition, the next one was the idea of a supermajority vote of the Commission for ordinances that increase land use, densities, intensities. This was previously examined by the CRC in 2016. I don't know if it was other than that, and maybe Ms. Smith knows, but the 2016 is the one I'm aware of, and no action was taken at that time. A relevant consideration, and it applies to some of these things, is that you have what is essentially an evolving problem, growth, and it's very difficult to solve it with a static solution. The idea of crafting something as a solution that is the idea of which is to tie your hands and keep you from changing doesn't always work in the context of an evolving problem. I say that because I was invited to share my experience from other places that I represent, local governments. Again, that is a concern for you to figure out how to deal with. I'm just raising it so it's on your radar screen. The pros that were argued for this in 2016 were it better protects rural areas and urban areas. Rural areas from becoming more dense, urban areas from becoming more gentrified. Environmental considerations were raised as a pro to protect the Econ River, Lake Pickett, and other natural assets. The idea was to control sprawl and gentrification. The cons that were argued, property rights, that it's undemocratic, it thwarts the power of elected officials. So that's the next one I had on my list. Then there was a proposal regarding urban service boundaries. The idea was that any change in a comp plan that would enlarge or create a new future land use overlay district increasing density or intensity outside the urban services boundary or adds land outside the urban services boundary to either a settlement area overlay or affordable housing overlay must be physically neutral and require a unanimous vote of the Commission. Now, I use some terms there I want to make sure that everybody here knows. Density means residential density. Intensity means commercial density. How big can the shopping center footprint be, and so forth. So density, residential, intensity, commercial. That's typically the way you would define it, and that's defined typically by floor area ratio. It's never been previously addressed as far as I could tell. Has it been?
I believe it has been in 2016, Council.
That wasn't in the data that I had, so I'm glad I asked the question.
Okay, sure.
And I know no action was taken regardless. So that's one I had on my list. I had one, dedicated funding for the Green Place Land Acquisition Program. I have zero idea or backup for that. I can say that it's something that I would raise to you as a concern, is that anytime you put dedicated funding in a charter, then you're going to create an issue that has to be funded some way. So is it going to be increased taxes? Is there going to be a source of revenue within the system that can be dedicated to this purpose? Don't know. That was something that if you decide to go down the road would need to be studied. So that's that one. In addition, and this is where I may or may not be getting all of yours, but I think I am. There was a request to review rural land protection by virtue of a supermajority for any annexation, supermajority of the commission, and that's where that, is it 5 of 7 or 6 of 9, and a majority of the voters in the area to be annexed is the proposal. It was addressed in 2016. No action was taken. Is that fairly represented? And then those are, I think, the only ones that I saw that fell under that specific item B. Did I leave anything out under B?
I think you covered them. I think that covers them. Given the information included in the packet and the information presented by our general counsel, is there a motion to establish these various, is there a motion to present these topics regarding land use and zoning as evaluation topics for this 2020 CRC?
I make a motion to establish the discussion and a committee on these topics.
We have a motion by Member Staccardo to establish these topics as an evaluation topics. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second by Member Nguyen. Discussion. Anyone wants to speak? Member Steinhauer.
Yes, thank you. So I heard a lot of talk, a lot of comments, not just at this meeting, but previous meetings regarding keeping rural areas rural and things along those lines. And I'm very sensitive to that and empathetic to your concerns, certainly. My issue is that when you talk about land use regulations, for me, it's something that is best in the purview of the county commissioners or of the planning and zoning departments. To put it in the charter, you get into a situation where, especially with the growth in Orange County and the different development patterns and what you have today versus what you might have tomorrow, what might be appropriate in terms of where the growth should be or not be. If you lock yourself in under the charter, you get into situations where not only is it a property rights situation where people won't be able to sell their homes, they're kind of locked into where they're zoned. To me, it's very difficult if you lock it in under a charter situation as opposed to putting it in the hands of planning and zoning and the county commissioners to make appropriate decisions based on the need at the time. So that's just something my vote would be that this isn't something that we should consider under the charter, but it is something that our local elected officials and our planning and zoning should be taking up, and that's where it's best suited.
Member Nguyen?
I thought we were going to discuss this. Some of it, yes, the Board of County Commissioners, and anyway, they have a final say. But there are a few things that I thought we should discuss. Even if we don't agree on all of it, I think it should be a discussion item.
Member Smith.
Member Nguyen, is there any way you can identify which ones that we should probably move forward with discussing?
One is the agriculture and the annexation.
So to be clear, you're talking about
discussing, yes.
Upzoning from agriculture, and the second one you said was?
Annexation proposals.
Annexation.
Yes. for discussion purposes. I'm not saying we ought to go and make a decision on if it should go on a ballot or whatever, but this is for discussion. Those are the two I am aware of. The other one, I'm not so sure. I know the zoning should be left to the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning and Zoning Commission. That is what they're designated for within Orange County.
Okay, and then we're going to go to the next speaker in a moment. Just to be clear for everyone that's on the CRC in the meeting, right now the motion that has been made and second is for all of the things, the proposals that were mentioned. Member Douglas, I think I had next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This really is issues that need to be addressed in the comprehensive plan. It should be presented to the next opportunity where they have a chance to modify the comprehensive plan and have them address it as part of those issues. I don't think it should be part of the charter of Orange County. I think it does not provide enough flexibility in case something changes. The charter should be strictly deal with such items as representation, when and if they're when county meetings are, the administrative portion of how the county runs, not on the specifics. That should be in the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Member Afant.
I have a question for council, if possible. I'm kind of confused, and it's maybe the attorney in me that keeps me confused all the time, so bear with me. I see 7013 come out of committee and basically block all effects of being able to sue legally. I also see that there was discussion that there's a statewide comprehensive plan, and I have to agree with Steve that there's a lot of things that the state really decides. How much of this is something that at the end of the day the county might not have, and following up on Mr. Douglas, how much of this is something that we really, if we did pass this, we would really have the control and not the state?
Well, that's a very good question, and the answer is that we have seen historically in this state by statute that it has gone both ways. Back in 2006, 5, 6, 7, there was a specific statute regarding whether or not you could regulate by referendum, which essentially this, at least part of these proposals would advocate for, the land uses on 5 or fewer parcels. And the idea was that, in theory anyway, that if you were 5 or fewer parcels, you couldn't, but if you were more than 5, then referendums would be okay. Well, that obviously was a cause of some consternation, and so that statute was eliminated. And so now, at least you could argue that in theory, the position of the legislature is that you are not allowed to regulate things that are regarding land use by referendum for any number of parcels, whether it's 5 or fewer or 1 or more. That is the argument. And the area that you're talking about in broad strokes is preemption. For example, anybody who's in government would know that local governments are preempted by the Florida Clean Indoor Air Act from regulating smoking in buildings or restaurants or other places. Things that you would consider local control issues have been taken away. Guns are another one. You would have had, I'm sure Orange County had, regulations that said no guns in parks. But those regulations are no longer enforceable under state law. Now, state law has its own regulations, but to the extent they're less strict than what you had, they're going to control. Obviously, in the advent of Parkland, this is a dynamic issue. It's been brought up in every legislative session, but so far, this is not a political commentary, it's a fact, the NRA lobby has carried the day. And so that's meant less restriction, not more. In land use, it is always going to be the clash between the rights of the landowner and the property rights folks, as well as the developers that people like to cast in a bad way, and I get it, I understand why, versus the people who say, look, we only got one planet, we all got to live on it. It was a great analogy, we're all living on the boat, but you can't keep drilling holes in the boat. So that's the tension. And so to your point, we can try to do this, and certainly if it goes to the committee, one of the things the committee would want to look at is for each proposal, what do we see as its legality potentially going forward and how long it will stand up, and we would do that for you. But at the end of the day, there are no guarantees.
Member Sicardo.
Okay. I'm going to go down the river here a little bit on a little history, and maybe I'll get to my point to it. After the Reconstruction Constitution was passed in 1868, I believe, no, 85, sorry, the legislature pulled all the power to the legislature, as you guys who are lawyers know that. And in the 1965, what we voted on in 1968, which none of us probably voted on except maybe one or two, we created this new constitution, which we're working to. We're working to Article 8, Section 1G, the charter government. And that was an effort to move from centralized power from the state and bring back home rule. Now, we've seen that go back and forth. And there's a fight, and there's always going to be a fight. So the charter here is pretty clear on what we can do. Basically, we can do basically anything we want to our charter as long as we don't step on the toes of the state, just to go pretty broad on that statement. Now, the citizens have been trying to get local control. And why is that? Because in 1985, we passed a really great growth management law. It was really good. Unfortunately, it's been beheaded. In 2008, March, to be exact, Rick Scott, our governor at the time, and the legislature decapitated it. And it's made it much worse. With the Governor DeSantis, with the signature of 7103, basically has caused all of us citizens to have basically no rights to speak. It really has shut up the community. If Marge is to sue someone at Sierra Club, we could all be sued. We were sued as an econ. I was a member of the environmental group called the Econ Coalition for Protection back in the late 80s, 90s. We formed that. They slap suited our whole board, including the 82-year-old mother. She eventually passed away from a heart attack for $15,000 a head. That's a way to shut people up. This law has really shut us up. Now, what I'm trying to do with these things is try to create a local control and growth management that we are strong enough that we can actually do something locally. I understand annexation is fearful of farmers who are out there. I fully support farmers. And you can read what I wrote. But we also have rights as citizens because we are taxpayers. We're paying huge amounts of money to subsidize, and it's subsidizing agriculture up to 97+%. I did some calculations looking at random pieces of property in the rural areas. I fully support it. I don't have a problem paying extra taxes for that. Now, if you want to come and change your land, okay, fine. I've seen it too many times as an environmentalist for 30+ years. These farmers come in and say, oh, this is my retirement. Well, fine. But they don't pay a dime for it. They've gotten the benefit. Our property appraiser has tried to sue, maybe down in International, where they have tree farms right by commercial places. We citizens, I think we need to discuss it. All these things, the annexations, the rural boundaries, those are actually concepts. You can do concepts in a constitution. I'm not saying specifically to give exact, okay, this density and this should look like this. What I'm saying is give them good guidelines on all these things, that this gives guidance to our council and the planners. That's what constitutions do. They don't spell out exactly, this is a functional constitution that we have. It's not a philosophy document like the U.S. Constitution. So it's really a game plan, but not to the level of saying how to dot the I. It's there to give guidelines. And I think annexation, land protection of urban, rural, these people all have rights. They all have expectations. We local citizens, and I'm speaking as a general citizen, have rights. And the only place I can see that happening now, since it's been taken away at the state level, is try to do it at the local level. That's our last remote chance of doing something. Otherwise, it's anarchy, because we're going to get frustrated. We have to have a way to speak calmly. And this is my attempt to give the citizens a way to speak calmly to the represent government of the councils. And also annexation, and this is actually on Lee's point. The reason why I'm doing annexations because cities can go and grab land. So it's really important to do this in the charter. Commissions can't do that. Charters can. And the Supreme Court has been pretty clear on that charters supersede municipalities. And there's many court rulings from the Florida Supreme Court that support that. So that's why I'm pushing this here. And I really support us to at least have a good discussion. I don't know where it's going to go, but I think we should, as calm people, speak among ourselves with the citizens and back and forth and understand where we want to go with this. And where it falls, it falls. But I think we should at least discuss it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Staccardo. Next person I have is Member Miller.
There's a lot of material that we were given, and maybe I'm missing something, but besides the annexation issue, doesn't this really just boil down to the number of votes that are required by the county commission? I mean, we're talking about either a supermajority or unanimous votes. Am I missing something?
General Counsel.
I'm going through my list right now to see. Supermajority was for increasing land use and densities. A referendum was on the upzoning of ag outside, so that's not the county commission. The urban services boundary was both a unanimous vote of the commission and fiscally neutral. The Green Place land acquisition is now voting part of it, and the rural lands protection, supermajority for annexation, and majority of voters in area to be annexed. So there are aspects that are commission and voters for at least two of them.
Yeah, I was just wondering how that accomplished your underlying principle of more citizen participation. I can understand the referendum part of it, but I'm not so sure about the supermajority and the.
And I do want to say, excuse me, I do want to say one thing because it is an issue that has not been decided, and Mr. Staccardo is exactly right on charters regarding almost everything with regard to city or county government, with one really large exception, and that's the comprehensive plan and land use. Because case after case after case has held, the comprehensive development plan for counties or cities is considered the constitution for land use. The issue that has never been decided by a court is whether it actually means what it says when it's had these multiple cases where it's made that pronouncement. Because there's never been here's what the charter says, I think that should overrule the comp plan. Here's what the comp plan says, I think it should overrule the charter if there's a conflict. And in fact, there was a case involving this in a marginal way out of the 5th District Court of Appeals, where when the citizens voted to amend the charter and the comp plan was likewise then changed to match the charter, the 5th District threw out the comp plan and the charter amendment, saying that when the city council voted for the change to the charter or change for the comp plan to match the changes that the voters put in to the charter, they had their hand signed behind their back because they thought they had to do that. And therefore, the 5th District threw out both the charter amendment and the comprehensive plan amendment. So it's an undetermined issue as to, in land use, whether when the courts have said, as they have multiple times, that the comp plan is the constitution of land use, whether they actually mean it because they haven't been confronted with this headbutting of different positions.
Thank you. Anybody else want to be heard before we call the question? Member Fouth.
So I think we need to distinguish two different items here, and Jeff hit it right on the head. The voting aspects, whether it's a supermajority or has to go to a referendum or a unanimous vote, those all arise when you have out-of-cycle changes to the comp plan. And that's the issue that folks, the citizens, have repeatedly brought before this commission in its brief iteration as the 2020 commission. I think it bears studying that question of how do we best address it. Because right now we're at a tipping point. We've got about half of the county is ag, or half is rural and half is urban. We can see the growth coming. This may be the last time to really set up meaningful ground rules so that the changes that happen are changes that are for the betterment of the county and its citizens in the long term and not just in the short term. And so there's no harm done in establishing a committee to address those questions and really dive down deep into it. We've heard repeatedly citizens coming here, and I understand it's been in other iterations too, bringing this issue forward. And that's what this commission is designed to do, is to hear those voices and to sit and really look seriously at it. And that's what the charter is for.
Thank you. Member Afant?
I agree with you 100% what you're saying. I have no problem with creating a committee. My problem is that, and I'm going to say this, we have about 7 issues packed in here, of which 2 I agree with and 5 I don't. And I'm going to be very honest. I don't have a problem of meeting with this. My problem is that, with all due respect, we all have limited time, and maybe it would be easier for us to maybe divide this in 2 groups, because realistically this might be too time consuming for one. Realistically, that my problem, I must say to you honestly, is not that I disagree with this, but there's 4 or 5, you put in here a 7-point package, of which some I just don't agree with. And I don't have a problem creating a committee, but I think this should go to at least 2 committees. One committee with 7 issues to deal with, Madam Chair, that's a little bit hectic too.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak? Member Smith?
Is it possible to, because it sounds like we have the 6 items that are under the land use and zoning, but it almost sounds as if we have conflicts with whether, when we make a vote, there may be multiple items that we're considering. Is it possible to pull out 2 of the items? We were talking about the annexation, and then we're talking about the agriculture piece. Pull them out and vote on them separately so that we can make a clearer determination on whether it's a topic that we should move forward with.
The current motion on the floor is for all of the items before you. You would have to see if the maker of the motion would like to rescind his motion. Member Staccato?
Well, there's really some overlap, and council projected that. So it's not quite the 6. It's really about this. The ag and annexation they're separate, but the other 4 actually kind of overlay each other in basically in their area of interest. So I don't think it's as complicated potentially. Certainly controversial issues, but we probably can deal with it and discuss it. It will take time, but they kind of go hand in hand. That's the thing, because there are charters out that do address some of these 4 of the issues. Annexation is a issue dealt with, and agriculture is kind of a novel thing that isn't being addressed for the first time. But they kind of have to go hand in hand, because you got to have protection of your ag outside the rural, and annexation goes along with a lot of that ag, and then the land use, voting, and how that comes about is all. So they all kind of go hand in hand. So to separate them gets a little complicated. So, and that's why I kind of put them together like that. It's not going to be easy. It'll be very interesting. It certainly will be interesting discussion, but it's not going to be simple discussion, and it will get quite interesting. And I look forward to it myself. But it's a question that I think we should address as one. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment.
So the motion stands as a 6. The motion stands as as the items as presented in the agenda. Is there anyone else who wants to be heard before we call the question? Member Steinhauer?
Do we have to wait for Afan to come back from the bathroom?
No, we do not. Hearing none, no other item, request for discussion. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Member Douglas? No. Member Drake?
Yes.
Chair Evans?
No.
Member Afant?
I'm sorry.
The motion is to refer it to committee, all the issues.
Oh, no.
Member Foth?
Yes.
Member Miller?
No.
Member Mims?
No.
Member Smith?
No.
Member Steinhauer?
No.
Member Staccardo?
Yes.
Vice Chair Torres?
Yes.
Member Wynn?
No.
Does not pass.
The motion did not pass. We'll move on to item C, 4C, proposed charter review topic, unlicensed contractor activity within Incorporated Orange County. General Counsel.
There was a very little information provided, but the information that was is that it had not been addressed by the CRC before in previous years. The request is that the charter be amended to provide authority to the county to enter into local agreements with cities to enforce unlicensed contractor activity in the area as being detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of citizens. The backup material that was provided is an audit conducted by the Comptroller's Office in which it was found that while fines had been meted out, a substantial portion of those fines had not been collected during the audited year or years. And so the idea would be that with more uniform, I assume, I'm speaking for the person who's proposing it, that with more uniform enforcement across the county and its various cities via in a local agreement, that there would be a tighter rein on contractors who wouldn't travel from, okay, I'm in unincorporated Orange County, but if I go to Edgewood, I'm good. Or from Edgewood to Orlando, or from Orlando to some other city, Ocoee in Orange County, and so forth. So I assume, don't know, that I'm getting that basically correct. And the only thing I would throw in there is that I suspect that you'll hear from the county attorney's office that they think they already have the authority to do these interlocal agreements. But that's my concern, so it may be unnecessary, but that's the item.
Given the information in the agenda package and the comments by the General Counsel, is there a motion to establish unlicensed contractor activity within Incorporated Orange County as a evaluation topic for the 2020 CRC?
Can I make a motion that, pursuant to what council said, that county attorney might tell us that they can already have this authority, that we await for that, for county attorney to come back to us?
Is your motion? Is the motion? So I hear that the motion is to table the issue until we hear back from the county attorney's office.
That was much more succinct. Yes, that's the motion.
There's a motion by Member Steinhauer. Is there a second? Member Afan has seconded that motion. Any discussion? No discussion. We'll call the question.
Member Afant?
Yes.
Member Douglas?
Yes.
Member Drake?
Yes.
Chair Evans?
Yes.
Member Afoth?
Yes.
Member Miller?
Yes.
Member Mims?
Yes.
Member Smith?
Yes.
Member Steinhauer?
Yes.
Member Staccardo?
Yes.
Vice Chair Torres?
Yes.
Member Wynn?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
All right. Thank you. Our next agenda topic is the proposed charter review topic of rights of the Wekiva River and Econ River. General Counsel.
Yes, ma'am. The idea was that these two rivers, the Econ and the Wekiva, would be granted through an action, an amendment to the charter, rights. And it talks about them as rights of natural features. And that's the concern. Essentially, as I understood what was presented, and I would be disingenuous if I didn't say there's a lot of meat that's not on the bones that really would need to be there for this to actually have a chance of withstanding legal challenge. But if I understand the idea correctly, it is that not only would the citizens who are affected be able to sue in the name of the river, so it'd be the Little Econ or the Big Econ River versus whomever, Orange County or somebody, and as well as as agencies that would have jurisdiction and so forth, I suppose, and that by recognizing the rights of these natural features, that it would provide some protection. The river part would not typically be, nor would any natural feature typically be considered a real party in interest. When we think of parties, we think of people. Obviously, there are also corporations that are thought of as interested parties based on ownership of things and so forth, and I'm sure that that is part of what has raised the concern. So as a concern, I would tell you that as drafted, it is as close to, and this is not intended to poo-poo the idea, it just needs a lot of work. But as an idea to consider, they have provided some information of other localities who have considered it. I have not seen any evidence, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, that this idea has ever actually been upheld, but it may have been. I'm unaware of it. And it certainly would be unique for Florida in that format, i.e. the feature has a right. The lake, the river, the hill, the sinkhole, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be the issue as I understood it, to the extent I was able to understand it.
Thank you. Given the information presented in the agenda, we also received public comment. I failed to mention that as well. And also the information provided by the General Counsel. Is there a motion to establish rights of the Wekiva River and Econ River as an evaluation topic for the 2020 Charter Review Commission?
I would make a motion to establish a commission to discuss it.
We have a motion by Member Staccardo. Is there a
second.
second? We have a second by Vice Chair Torres. Discussion. Member Staccardo.
The concept is established as a right of nature was in the Pennsylvania Constitution, and it went to their Supreme Court, and that was a very important moment because that was fracking that they fought, and they won with that preamble in their Constitution that the rights of nature do have some level of protection. So that's where a lot of this is coming from, that there's a movement out there that be established that we, as a part of the nature, do have a right to protect our resources. And the right of nature is the basis of life on this planet. As if you watched television last night and watching the Apollo 8, that blue Earth, that's the only blue color, that's the only color that they saw. And that's what we're trying to protect here. And that's the only place we have. And as a former NASA employee who was working for 30 years, and proudly, this is it. This is it. Everything we know is here. And if we mess this one up, and that was what I was trying to do with the last thing, we don't have option B. Option B is extinction. And we're certainly potentially facing that. And all these things that are being established here are trying to do carbon neutral things. We're not trying to mitigate. We're trying to avoid carbon production. We only can sequester things so fast. So the right of nature is critical as a legal defense to support our life system called Earth. And if we mess this up, it's cheap talk to say you worry about your kids, because I'm sorry, after the last thing that just happened, you guys you're messing with the future, and you can't change the Titanic hitting the wall if you go too far, and we're almost at that point. And that's why people are getting pretty desperate in the environmental community. And I represent a lot of environmental community. So that's my point. We need to establish and at least talk about it.
Thank you, Member Staccato. Member Font and Miller. Then.
And preservation of trying to get out here, I will vote for this, but I reserve my right to a final vote because I would like to see the SAC language that's going to come out of committee. And that would be my recommendation. We could vote for this. I don't have a problem. Really, I tend to agree with council. I'm not sure what exactly is going to be on the ballot, and that's a question that might come up later. But at this point, I would move that we vote on it. And basically, then when the committee comes out and tells us this is what we're proposing, then we can say yeah or nay, because right now, I have no idea what we're voting on.
To be clear, the motion is already on the table. Any Member Miller?
Yeah, I have real concerns about constitutionality of this, the preemption aspect of it. I read a part of the law article. It seems to be based on some concept of the constitutional right of self-government at the local level, which could raise a whole lot of slippery slopes because it could go beyond the environment. And I'm just kind of curious about how, and I understand. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful goal, and I'm totally in support of the concept. I just, once you recognize the Econ or the Wekiva River, then there are other ecosystems, there are other natural occurrences in our environment. It would seem to me that we would then have to look at all of them. The proposal that, as it's been written, is very confusing to me, and particularly with regard to citizen standing. It seems to me that any citizen, any number of citizens can institute the action, any number of citizens can intervene. It seems to me that it would be very unwieldy. So I really love the idea. I think it's something that needs to be considered, but as it's been presented, it's too confusing. I don't see any roadmap for us here. So that's my concern.
Member Steinhauer.
Yeah, I just want to echo a lot of what Representative Miller said. From a legal standpoint, I have a lot of questions. I mean, it really kind of, just a number of questions that this opens up. It's very broad, it's very vague, and so I'm very concerned in that regard. Also, a number of the members said, we don't really know what this is, and I'm not really comfortable putting together a committee that we're going to spend time on when we have a number of issues to study something that, frankly, at this moment, I don't really understand it at a level that I think I'm comfortable trying to get it potentially on the charter. So,
Member Smith.
Yeah, I second that, Steinhauer. I do want to point out that it is a critical topic. It is something that's very important that we do need to discuss. What I'm not clear about is whether, I guess the correlation, council, if you can help me with this, the correlation between this and the charter. No, and the charter, like where exactly does it lie? And forgive my ignorance, I'm trying to tie it in with the charter specifically.
Well, I couldn't really tell you from what I read. That's part of the problem, along with a whole host of others. Like a lot of words are used that everybody walking around might think they know the answer to, but I can tell you based on literally hundreds of thousands of pages, tell me what pollution is. That's why they make regs. And so a lot of these things that are conceptual and sound good and are motivated by the best, the reality is we start measuring pollution to air by parts per billion, and that's not here. And so in terms of where it is in the charter, except as an aspirational thing right now, that's the best it could be, because it would be impossible to the general premise is, whether it's in a charter or an ordinance or a state statute or a federal statute, is you have to charge the people with enough notice of what it is they would be doing that's wrong in order to actually do something about it. And this doesn't even get anywhere in the ballpark.
So that being said, I encourage those, because I would hate, I know we're going to vote on it, but I would hate for this to be something that just kind of remains on the list. I would encourage those who kind of put the topic before us to perhaps add some more meat to it, so that, especially the correlation with how can the charter what can we do for you, in terms of the charter that's correlated to that topic so that it can be represented to us. Hopefully, we can do a better job at addressing the issue.
Ms. Member Drake.
Yes. So I'm actually in support of this. This is the most relevant thing that's been on our agenda, and I know I've talked the most tonight. But, if you look at the back of the packet that Chuck O'Neill has provided us, it has in here the Wekiva River and Ekanlachi River Bill of Rights that he's listed. Essentially, that they'll possess the rights to include, but not limited to, the rights to naturally exist, flourish, regenerate, and evolve. And I understand that we're opening the door for some other things to be brought to us. But right now, what's before us is the Wekiva River and the Ekanlachi River. And, everybody says it's an important topic, so let's have the audacity to discuss it as a board.
Any other members? Member Staccato.
This country started as a concept, we the people, and look where we're at today. So all great things need to start someplace. So what I'm asking for is for us to at least have a discussion. And what I'm hoping, if I was part of that committee, I would want a workshop type atmosphere where I could have back and forth. And I think that's real important to hear what the citizens over here are speaking about and get more data. I don't want to see it just killed here, because I don't know how we bring up a same issue from Robert Rule's point of view. I'm not sure how we do that. If there is a problem, it is okay. I really want us to just discuss it. It might only last 1 or 2 meetings. I think we volunteered to do this. It's our commitment, and we signed up for a year to do it. So I'm willing to do it. I want the citizens here took time to come here, and they're going to probably give us more data. They are very concerned, and certainly would be an interesting topic to even dive into, because it's a very novel, interesting area. And I think we should. And all great things do start someplace, and this is potentially a beginning of something.
Member Fowl.
I also support adding this to our agenda. And looking at Section 106 of our current charter that deals with security of the citizens, it lists 5 different aspects of the charter form of government. And there are 2 that, from my reading of this document, appear nowhere in the charter. Proper use of public property, which the Ekon River and the Wekiva would be, as their state lands, submerged lands, and prevention of abuse of the environment. Those 2 things are not in here at all. And so this is a bold proposal. It's based on theory that's been around for about 50 years. It's starting to perk to the surface. I know the city of Toledo recently recognized Lake Erie. I also recognize, some of the legal challenges that might come from this. As someone who originates from the great state of New York, I know that we have protection of the Adirondack Park in our state constitution, and that's held for over 150 years. It has a very specific language in it. So whether the proposed language that we've been given changes over time, we at least should give it that hearing.
I don't see any other hands seeking comments, so at this time we'll call the question. Will you?
Member Font? Yes. Member Douglas? Yes. Member Drake?
Yes.
Chair Evans?
No.
Member Foth?
Yes.
Member Miller?
No.
Member Minns?
Yes.
Member Smith?
No.
Member Steinheier?
No.
Member Staccato?
Yes.
Vice Chair Torres?
Yes.
Member Wynn? No. No? Passes.
The next question before the CRC is whether the rights of the Wekiva River and Econ River should be assigned to the work of a committee or if it should be handled by the CRC as a body. Is there a motion to establish a committee?
I move that we establish a committee.
I second that motion.
Member Alfont made the motion. Member Staccardo made the second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, can you call the roll, please?
Member Font,
Yes.
Member Douglas,
Yes.
Member Drake,
Yes.
Chair Evans,
Yes.
Member Foth,
Yes.
Member Miller,
Yes.
Member Mims,
Yes.
Member Smith,
Yes.
Member Stonehart,
Yes.
Member Staccardo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Torres,
Yes.
Member Wynn.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Okay, we're going to establish a committee. The chair will be Member Staccardo. Next member will be Member Alfont. Next member will be Member Foth. Next member will be Nikki Mims. And our next member will be Tony Suarez. The chair will work with CRC staff to establish the meeting dates. Those meeting dates, as I mentioned previously, will be included, are already identified in the materials provided on our website and in Legistar. Once that actual date, those dates are submitted, they will be noticed as on all our other sunshine meetings. General Counsel, we are at item E.
The last item. This proposal is through Member Staccardo, and it is that there be a ethics rule applied in the county through the charter to lobbyists that would prohibit lobbyists from being appointed to committees, except in so much as that would conflict with state law. And it would prohibit for a period of 2 years after a citizen serving on a non-elected committee or board commission position from becoming a paid lobbyist. In terms of any additional information, there is, I'm trying to see if I had any concerns. There is a possible First Amendment concern. Anytime you restrict someone's right to speak or otherwise participate in government, but in this case, there's obviously the issue of having been a lobbyist or perhaps becoming a lobbyist and its potential for having a bad effects on government. It is a concern. Someone will probably raise it. It is something that I think could be defended if it was raised.
Hearing the information presented in the by General Counsel and the information submitted in the agenda, is there a motion to establish the ethics for appointing lobbyists to citizen boards and commissions, a prohibition, a evaluation topic for the 2020 CRC?
I make a motion to establish a committee to discuss this.
Member Staccardo has established a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Member Vice Chair Torres is a second. Any discussion?
I have a question for Counsel.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure what 707G is trying to say, but the way I read it, like I am a volunteer right now on the CRC. If I was to go into lobbying work, I couldn't do it for 2 years after I've left the charter review? Is that what it says?
That's what it appears to say. Mr. Staccardo can clarify, but as I read it, that's exactly what it would mean. It would mean, for example, if any of you here, because you would qualify as a citizen serving on a non-elected committee, board, or commission, you couldn't become a paid lobbyist. So you couldn't, and this is important. What a lobbyist is defined is covered by state law. And in state law, at least under the ethics rules that are spelled out under Chapter 112, anybody who's been paid in the last 12 months for anything is considered a lobbyist. And so, for example, I use this in the cities we represent all the time. Someone comes to you who is a local realtor, and you have no idea that they actually might be working either by being paid or on a commission basis if a property is able to sell because it's under an option contract. If the zoning or the comp plan is changed to suit it and says, I want to take you to lunch and talk about this thing, You may or may not know that they're a lobbyist, but as a matter of law, you would be held accountable for that issue if the lobbyist bought your lunch and it was over a certain dollar amount and didn't report it, or you got gifts and so forth and so on. So the term lobbyist doesn't mean just the guys that go to Tallahassee and the women that go to Tallahassee that will all announce themselves as lobbyists, because indeed there are people who are in the audiences of most county commission or city council type meetings that may not even actually know that they themselves are lobbyists, but they are legally lobbyists. So it would stop you from doing that.
Thank you.
Member Steinhauer.
Yeah, so one of my concerns I brought up tonight is that, I think that you look at ethics, I again would say county commission can make up their own ethics, and each commission can see what they want to be appropriate in terms of appointing people to commissions or whatever rules and regulations they want to put in place. To put it in the charter, I just don't think that's the right place to do it. Also, again, to your point, what is a lobbyist? Who is a lobbyist? I think that the idea of who you want to prevent potentially, you're going to prevent a lot of people that you didn't want to prevent from serving on boards. I mean, the person who's the executive director of United Way could be considered a lobbyist. There's so many different people. Just look at the Orange County registration. I mean, every land use attorney is going to have to register. Anyone who talks to commissioners with any regularity, whether it be for a charity organization, a nonprofit organization, you name it, is going to fit within that rubric. So to say that they can't serve in their local government and have a benefit to their citizens and bring their skills and expertise, particularly in something that might be not even related to what they do in terms of their jobs, I think is unfair, violates the First Amendment, and frankly, I have a lot of issues with it from that regard. But at the end of the day, as well, I don't think this is a charter review, issue.
Actually, I do want to clarify something so everybody knows this. If you're not aware, some of you may be, the county already requires anybody who is lobbying, and that includes being a lawyer for a developer or a property owner or a citizen, to sign in before you can talk to. You got to disclose all that stuff where you can actually meet and speak to your commissioner as a citizen if you happen to be a lawyer. So all of that is already present, but it's by the rules that the commission has established. In terms of whether it goes or doesn't go in the charter, that's for you all to decide whether you want to do it, but I want to make sure you understood that that rule already exists.
Member Nguyen.
That's what I wanted to say, Chair. He already said it. Because once you go up to any meeting on the fifth floor, you sign in and you say if you are a lobbyist or not. So anyway, most attorneys are called lobbyists anyway. Most of them, because they are representing their clients.
It is important, too, to understand, because the Member Steinhauer was right about one thing. Every law and every change in the law can have an unintended consequence. So, for example, you guys might not think of, you raised the United Ways. I'm going to think of one that's been very relevant here tonight. And I have no knowledge of how the Sierra Club works, but if it has anybody who's paid, who then shows up to talk about an issue of which they're actually legitimately concerned, whether they're being paid or not, they couldn't serve where you're sitting right now. Or if they served where you're sitting right now, they couldn't come back and speak for the Sierra Club for the next year to 2 years, depending on how it goes. So it's an unintended, perhaps, consequence, but it's what this would mean.
Member Miller.
Just briefly, I think that, again, we're all trying to do the right thing here, and the goal is good, but I think there's a lot less restrictive way to do this, such as disclosure and abstention. When someone who is a lobbyist, happens to serve on a board or might think of themselves as lobbyists. And the other problem I have with it is the part about not becoming a lobbyist after 2 years. I think that is kind of, I just don't know how in the world you would enforce it and what are the penalties that would go along with that. So those are my concerns.
Member Afam.
I have a question. As the only sitting member in this committee who's the representative of District 4 before the membership committee of Orange County, who appoints everybody to every advisory board in this county, I have a problem because many times I have to get an electronic engineer for the zoning board, and half the time I could find just one person, and if that person by any reason has been contracted by XYZ company to go in and try to get approval of something, is that going to be a problem? Because it's hard enough right now for us to get people on advisory boards in Orange County. If I'm going to have to add the caveat, by the way, did you go and meet with Commissioner such and such to advocate for this point? Is that going to preclude him?
Well, as drafted, it says a prohibition against appointing registered lobbyists. The term's not defined here. I do not know, without talking to the party who drafted it, what they meant by registered, but there is a state definition for that.
Which is, and anybody, which is the one you just gave
yes.
us. And I'm concerned that that might come back and bite us, that somebody who I might need to appoint to a board just because as an engineer or something like that, he went and advocated for a point, then he ends up not being able to be on that board. I have serious concerns. I'm sorry. That's it.
Member Staccardo?
What I was trying to get here was a discussion, and it's a starting point what I wrote. And I think it's a starting point where we can go from and change as the discussion goes on within that committee. What I'm trying to do is, from a citizen point of view, we as citizens question if someone is representing a company and they're sitting on a board voting on potential issues. And that brings in the question of representative of government and democracy. And I'm trying to make our government more open, and I realize it's a financial hit. Now, as a federal employee / retired now, if I was going to board, now I don't know how many of y'all have been in civil service, we sign, and we give up certain First Amendment rights, we give up rights when we become civil servants and we take the oath. One of those things is when we serve boards, we have to give up, when the lawyers come in and say, you're on the board, you have no option. You sell all your stocks at that moment. You have no option. You have about 24 hours to get rid of all your stocks, and if you're basically a GS 15 and above, I was not that level, but I had to go do an exit interview with the law office in the 3rd floor of headquarters. You know, they put restrictions for 2 years as civil servants. That's what your civil servants are living to. It's a dedicated service, and that's what I expect from our boards. Now, we certainly can address it. I try to address it with the registered concept, that if you're registered, you know, that was what I was trying to do with that. But we certainly can talk about it, broaden it, deal with it, and try to address what I think is an issue from the citizen's point of view to our government. I have no problem a person from the aircraft industry, electronics industry coming in and talking to us. There are the experts. You're the expert in law. I expect you to come and tell me what the heck's going on, because that's what you do. But if you're representing a power company and you're voting on issues that could affect that, that's a conflict of interest. And I'm trying to make government clean, and maybe that's my concept.
There's two parts to it, though. That first part that you're talking about, I think there still may be some objections to it. It's the second part that's actually more potentially problematic, at least from a First Amendment standpoint. Here's why. So I'm on this board here, or this committee, and I step off the board as Mr. Alphonse a lawyer, Mr. Miller's a lawyer, I forget the other fellow who's a lawyer who's not here tonight, and then the next thing you know, he or any of them have a client who has to come back before the county commission because they have a project. I can't represent you because I was there. Now, the idea behind it is, well, you have an undue influence because you had an opportunity to meet and rub shoulders with and become friendly with, and maybe they'll treat you differently. But if you change the example, I'm someone who gets paid my living from being a lawyer, as an example, but I'm also entitled to actually believe what I say.
Sure.
And although some lawyers don't, some lawyers actually do. And so the fact that they're paid is irrelevant. And by telling them, you can't speak because you're being paid to speak, is a First Amendment issue that is of concern.
And that's where, I'm sorry.
Member Faust.
So I think the answer of whether this topic should be added to our agenda is obvious from the discussion that's going on right here, right now. It seems like we don't have to vote on the language of this proposal, but there's a lot of discussion about how to fine tune it, how to make it better, and how to make it work both for very clear and transparent government, which Lord knows we need, but also not to disadvantage individuals who have legitimate rights to ply their trade. So it just seems blatantly obvious. This should be a topic.
Member Miller?
Are any of these issues covered in the county? We do have an ethics code or an ethics ordinance, don't we?
I honestly have not looked at the code as it applies to former commissioners. I can get you that answer in a matter of.
I know we got sort of an overview when we first started,
right.
and it seemed to me that there were some of these issues were addressed.
Yes.
Such as not being able to vote on something where you are a registered lobbyist.
Or whether you may have been involved in it in the past, and certainly as we've discussed, if you go down and try to talk to your county commissioner, you're going to fill out a long piece of paper just to go talk.
I agree with what you just said, and I think we all are very concerned about ethics in government, but I also don't want to waste time on stuff that's already been addressed. So I don't know whether we could have a refresher course in that, or I don't know.
Anybody? Member Smith?
All right, so I think you're referring to the Florida Commission on Ethics, right? So we were provided the Guide to Sunshine Amendment and Code of Ethics for Public Officers and Employees. So I have to agree that I would not want to duplicate efforts. We had a pretty lengthy presentation in the beginning of our CRC, the 2020 CRC. I would think that we wouldn't spend more additional time on outlining what our responsibilities are in reference to ethics. But there are some pieces that may need some further conversation, so perhaps it can be resubmitted with more specifics as to how it's related to the charter.
And perhaps what is already existing, what ethical obligations are already existing. So maybe we could table this and have that analysis given to us.
And I'm happy to provide it. I've written it down as a potential research for the next time if that's what you decide.
Is that a motion, Mr. Miller? So I can second it?
Mr. Miller can't make that motion. We currently have a motion on the table for establishment of this this topic. And to have that no longer be a motion, you would have to ask the maker of the motion if he'd like to rescind his motion. That would be Member Staccardo.
I'm willing to table it and bring it back to discussion and try to develop the idea better. And I don't know how I can get inputs from people. That's the only issue, because if we find this, I want to hear people's opinions on it. So maybe the chair can give me some guidance or the legal to be within the sunshine.
Well, based on what I heard, first of all, the sunshine only matters if at least two of you get together and talk about the business that is coming before you in the future or has come before you in the past. That's a sunshine issue. And that means that in order to do that legally, you have to have a notice meeting with minutes in a public facility where everybody who wants to can come show up and listen and all of those things. And so that's the sunshine issue, though it really isn't one as long as what we're doing is here. What I hear, or what I think I hear, is that there is, why are we redoing this if we don't need to? What does Orange County already provide? And unfortunately, I didn't anticipate that being an issue. I could have come with a brief and tell you, here's what Orange County already provides. The bigger question then becomes, if you see it and you say, well, we're comfortable with that, but, and this is always the but, we don't trust them because they could always change it. It's a unique function of being in local government that the current body of elected officials or appointed officials never trust who's coming next. And so they want to tie their hands so that they can't become bad people or do bad things. So that'll be the next topic. But I can brief you at the next meeting, here are the rules that already apply in Orange County, and here's where you find them. And also how that ties into state law, because there is this truth that you need to understand. Just because Chapter 112, the state ethics for municipal and other local officials, is there, it does not provide the only guidance that you're allowed. You can have tighter rules than state law. You just can't have looser rules than state law. So the question then becomes, if you're going to tighten them, how much are you going to tighten them, and is it to a point where it's an overreach from a constitutional standpoint?
So, I mean, I'm willing to table it, and I guess discussion is going to have to be in the public realm of, we can't do a bulletin board. That's not legal. I mean, I guess it's kind of difficult to get inputs on what I need to tweak.
Well, that would be the kind of thing that would be discussed either here, if you decide not to use a committee, and say, look, I have a problem with this part of your proposal. I think it's too broad in this regard. The term is too long. It's 2 years. It should be 6 months. That kind of thing, whether it's in a committee or as a part of the whole body based on you, if it decides to go forward, that's where you could address it, and that's where you get the feedback. But you don't get it on a bulletin board or an email or a text or at a bar or anywhere else.
Okay.
You do it here.
We still had the, do you want to continue? There is a question right now because someone asked if you wanted to rescind the motion. Do you want to hear more discussion before you evaluate your decision? Okay, Member Smith?
I was just going to say that we had quite a discussion. I guess there were some really good points that came up while we were talking about it. Would the minutes from today's discussion be sufficient to be able to represent the topic next meeting?
I guess so.
I'm going to acknowledge our staff member Smith. She has a good point.
Thank you. I'd like to remind the commission that these are action minutes. They are not verbatim and summaries, so while we do talk and identify the topics that were raised, they're not verbatim, which will include each of your comments and remarks today. We do have the audio. I will make one point, if I could. I've heard a lot of comments. Chair, may I take the floor for a moment? I've heard a lot of comments. You do have an option if you do decide to take this on as an evaluation topic. If it moves forward to a committee, you could have your legal counsel address that committee at that time if you did not want to wait the month.
Can I make a motion just to try to form a committee to discuss this concept? Because that seems like the only legal way of doing it.
The process is, we establish whether or not we're going to discuss the concept, and then we establish whether or not it's going to go to a committee.
Yeah.
So the question for you, Member Saccardo, is the motion that you've made to establish this as an evaluation topic, if that motion stands, or if you want to rescind that motion in favor of either of tabling it for now.
I guess I'd like to table it and then make a following motion to try to better understand the issue so we can maybe get enough data to move forward with the tabled issue. And that might take one meeting or two from council and discussion. So I just need more, I need some way to discuss this.
Given the timeline that's been established for materials to come into meetings and then items to get on the agenda, here's a suggestion. Since the question that I was asked is, what is the current rules that are applied in Orange County? I can get you a brief on that in a memo and have it distributed through Katie, so you all can have the same information. You'll have it, and so will everybody else. And then from that, you'll know what's already there. That and state law, I'll give you the basics. Here's what is already in place regarding lobbying, because I can't cover the whole code. You'd have a much longer memo. I'd have a bigger bill, but you'd have a much longer memo. And so, but if I focus on just the lobbying aspect, I can get you a memo in the next week or so that tells you what you need to know and gives you time to decide, yeah, I still think we need something that's in the charter, and then perhaps you can suggest what that might be. And again, subject to whatever the chair rules, or I don't want to overstep. I've deferred to the chair on who I'm allowed to talk to about what, because there's a bill that comes associated with that. But if I'm allowed to talk to any of you about anything and it's okay with the chair or I'm otherwise authorized to do it, I'll be happy to talk to you one-on-one. But that's not my call.
So I'd like to table it and then review, get the information from council, review the tape of what we discussed and try to derive something out of that and bring it back to the next business meeting.
So you've rescinded the motion, and now the new motion is to table and bring it to the next meeting. Is there a second? Is that correct?
Second.
Yes, that is
Yes,
correct.
it is correct.
All right, and then there's a motion by Member Staccato. Is there a second for tabling? I thought I heard one to the right. Who was it? Member of Font with a second? Any further discussion? All right, will you call the question, please?
Member Afon?
Yes.
Member Douglas?
Yes.
Member Drake?
Yes.
Chair Evans?
Yes.
Member Afon?
Yes.
Member Miller?
Yes.
Member Mims?
Yes.
Member Smith?
Yes.
Member Steinhardt?
Yes.
Member Staccato?
Yes.
Vice Chair Torres?
Yes.
Member Wynn?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Last item on our agenda is new business. I will start by reiterating the fact that I really appreciate the time and effort that the members of our community have taken to attend our meetings, provide information, very, very rich resources in some cases, so thank you. We did review that and appreciate that. Want to remind you that we have on our website a process for submitting documents and things, getting them on the agenda. Please avail yourself of that. Our next meeting is August 7th. Based on the deadlines that we've established on our evaluation process, your written materials, anything that you want to be submitted to the agenda needs to be to CRC staff by July 26th. I respectfully request that you don't send those items at 11:59 p.m. or sometime after close of business. We want, the whole point is to get that stuff in staff hands so it can start to be processed for the agenda. So please try and get it in advance of close of business so it can be in the materials that we evaluate. The agenda for the August 7th meeting will be distributed on July 31st. And we again appreciate it. We will do public comment at the beginning of that meeting as well. I am sorry, I do not recall. We are back in chambers? No, we're in District 1.
That's correct, Dr. Phillips High School.
We're in District 1 for Dr. Phillips High School, so that will be 6 p.m. on August 7th. That is our next meeting. Absent anything else, Member Smith would like to be heard.
All right, so I recently sat with my community and had a conversation about CRC and just wanted to make sure they were aware of being able to come out and listen and be a participant. And when some of the pieces of the documents that were on the website came up, it was almost overwhelming for them. So I bring this up because the portion where we outlined the evaluation process for potential topics for two neighbors, it was a little overwhelming. Is there any way that we can possibly provide a shorter, more brief version of like a flow chart of submit here, email here, just 1, 2, 3, so that it's less intimidating for the community? Or is that something that
we worked hard to distill it down to a page and a half, and that page and a half includes a third of that page as a table. I'm not really of the opinion that there's further tweaking that we need to do to make this more user-friendly. We've done a lot to work with staff to enhance our website, to make sure the materials that they've asked for are available and that they're well aware of when things are available. I do not, it is not lost on me that it can be at times challenging, but I don't think we're asking that we're hiding the ball, so to speak, as to how things can be done, get done.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to make sure the community is heard because they did bring that up to me. So I want to make sure that we were aware, and if it's at all in our power to make that adjustment. I mean, we have 15 people here that might be able to compress, and I know it's difficult because we want to be very specific, but I want to make sure I put that out there.
Thank you for the comment.
I just want to say, Chair, and to everyone, we should thank the staff for their hard work and all that they're doing for us. I think we need to give them a round of applause because certainly they work extremely hard for us to make us look so good here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, thank you all for your time. It's 8:51. We're going to adjourn the July 10th meeting of the CRC. Thank you.
You're watching Orange TV, your government in action, a service of Orange County government.